The lanterns of
My love,
Thornwood
is that
Estate
you?
burned gold that
I'm
October
here. Stay
evening
with
in
me. She needs
1889.
rest.
The
I
kind
will.
of gold that belongs
I
only to
cannot
wealth.
stay here.
Old
You
wealth.
must. We have
The
no
kind
choice.
that
There's
builds
always a
empires
choice.
from railroads
Don't you
and
dare
steel,
walk away!
that fills ballrooms with champagne and crystal, that makes men bow and women curtsy without question. But gold can hide many sins. Evangeline Ashford stood on the North Tower balcony 40 feet above the stone courtyard below. She was
Will he
22
return
years old with
tonight?
auburn hair
I cannot
that
bear
fell
this
past her
waiting.
shoulders and hazel eyes that still believed the world was fundamentally good. She wore an ivory engagement gown custom-made in Paris that caught the evening breeze like a sail. She was looking at the stars. She had always looked at the stars when she wanted to hold a moment still, to press it between her palms before it slipped away forever. The music drifted up from the grand ballroom. Strauss. Always Strauss at events like this. 300 guests filled the estate, their laughter weaving through the corridors like smoke. Senators, railroad magnates. The Astors had come. The Vanderbilts had sent their regrets, but a gift worth more than most men earned in a lifetime. This was her engagement party. To Thaddeus Blackwood, the most sought-after bachelor in New York society. A man who owned half the railroads between here and California. A man who had chosen her not for her father's money, though Richard Ashford had plenty, but because of a conversation they had shared 18 months ago. She had corrected a false story being told about a kitchen maid, by name, with facts, without embarrassment. Most women of her station would have stayed silent. Evangeline had not been raised to stay silent. Thaddeus had not been able to forget it. Behind her, the balcony door opened. Evangeline turned with a smile, expecting Thaddeus, perhaps, or her father come to fetch her back to the party. It was neither. Constance Ashford Moreau stood in the doorway. Her stepmother. The woman who had raised her for the past 6 years since marrying Richard Ashford in the quiet period after Elizabeth Ashford's death. Constance wore deep plum velvet tonight, her dark hair pinned in the severe style of old aristocracy, pearls resting at her throat like a collar. She looked to any observer like a woman about to offer her stepdaughter a loving word on this important night. She was not. Lady Constance, Evangeline began, her smile still in place. I was just taking a moment to... You cannot have him. The words were soft, almost gentle, the kind of tone a mother might use to explain a difficult truth to a child. Evangeline's smile faltered. I'm sorry, Constance stepped onto the balcony. The door closed behind her with a whisper of hinges, the sound swallowed immediately by the music below. Up here, they were alone, isolated. The tower stood at the estate's northern corner, built by Richard's grandfather in 1845, its purpose long forgotten. Thaddeus Blackwood, Constance said, moving closer. You cannot have him. Serafina will. Evangeline felt something cold move through her chest. Serafina, Constance's daughter, her stepsister. A girl 1 year younger than herself, beautiful in the practiced way of women who have been taught from birth that beauty is currency. I don't understand, Evangeline said, though somewhere deep, somewhere she had been refusing to look for 6 years, she understood perfectly. Constance's face held something Evangeline had never seen there before. Not anger, not even cruelty, something colder than both, something that had been planned. You are Elizabeth's ghost, Constance said. You have haunted this house since the day I married your father. Your mother's portrait, your mother's memory, your mother's eyes staring at me from across every dinner table. I have tried to bury her for 6 years, but you keep bringing her back. My mother died of pneumonia, Evangeline whispered. Your mother, Constance said, and something flickered in her eyes, died because she was in my way, just as you are in Serafina's way now. The world seemed to tilt. Evangeline grabbed the balcony railing for support, her fingers closing around cold iron. You're telling me she never finished the sentence. Constance placed both hands on Evangeline's shoulders, firm, deliberate, the hands of a woman who had made a decision months ago and had been waiting for precisely this moment to execute it. Forgive me, Constance whispered, though there was no remorse in her voice. But some ghost must be laid to rest. And she pushed. The balcony railing caught Evangeline at the waist. For one suspended moment, she felt the iron bite into her ribs, felt her body teetering on the edge of physics and fate. Then the iron no longer caught her. Ivory silk tore. The sound was obscene in its intimacy. A long strip of fabric remained in Constance's hands as Evangeline's body pitched backward into empty air. She had time for one thought, impossibly clear. This is how I die. The fall lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds is an eternity when you are falling. Long enough to see the stars wheel overhead. long enough to feel the cold air rush past your face, long enough to understand that the woman who had sat across from you at breakfast for 6 years, who had brushed your hair when you were 16, who had smiled at your engagement announcement, had just murdered you. Long enough to know you would never see Thaddeus again. Her left side struck the sloped stone embankment first. The impact drove the breath from her lungs in a sound like a sob. Her left arm folded beneath her at an angle nature never intended. The snap was audible, even over the music from below. Bone-breaking, Radius and Ulna both. Her head followed striking stone and the world became liquid. Colors bled together. Sound stretched into something unrecognizable. Pain arrived like a thunderclap so large it seemed to exist outside her body entirely. She rolled. The slope of the embankment sent her tumbling down finally coming to rest in the soft earth of the east garden 20 feet from where she had first struck stone. She tried to breathe. Her ribs screamed in protest. 2 of them cracked. Maybe 3. Blood ran warm from her scalp, soaking into the earth beneath her head. She could taste copper, could feel her heartbeat in her shattered arm, each pulse a fresh wave of agony. Above her, impossibly far away, she saw the balcony. Saw Constance's silhouette against the golden light from inside. Watched as her stepmother looked down for one long moment, then turned and walked calmly back into the estate. 90 seconds. That was all it had taken. 90 seconds to commit murder and return to a ballroom full of witnesses who would swear Constance had never left. Evangeline tried to move. Her left arm wouldn't respond. Her left shoulder felt wrong, torn, something deep inside damaged in ways she couldn't name. The world was starting to gray at the edges. Shock. Blood loss. Her body trying to shut down. This is how it ends, she thought. In a garden. Alone. Then she heard footsteps, running. Fast. Someone breathing hard. A man's voice, unfamiliar, urgent. Jesus Christ. Hands on her neck. 2 fingers pressed to her throat, checking for pulse. The touch was professional. Efficient. Don't move, the voice said. Don't try to move. I saw what happened. I saw her push you. Evangeline tried to speak. Nothing came out but a sound like broken glass. My name is Nathaniel Wren, the man said, and his voice was steady despite the urgency. I'm going to get you out of here, but not back to that house. Do you understand? Blink once if you understand. She blinked. Good, Nathaniel said. Stay with me. I need you to stay conscious. He lifted her. The world became pain incarnate. Every movement sent fresh agony through her broken ribs, her shattered arm, her torn shoulder. She tried to scream, but her lungs couldn't find the air. I know, Nathaniel said, his voice close to her ear as he carried her, and I know it hurts. But if I take you back to that estate, that woman will finish what she started. Trust me, please. Through the haze of pain, Evangeline focused on his face. He was perhaps 30 years old with dark hair and a face that looked like it had seen harder things than this. His clothes were good quality but not expensive. A professional man, not gentry. Why had he been in the East Garden? Why had he seen? He carried her to a carriage waiting on the service road. The driver, an older man with a scar across his jaw, took one look at Evangeline and swore. Dr. Crane's place, Nathaniel ordered, fast as you can without killing her on the way. The carriage lurched into motion. Evangeline felt consciousness slipping. The pain was too large. Her body was trying to shut down to escape into darkness where the agony couldn't follow. Stay awake, Nathaniel commanded. He had torn his coat into strips and was wrapping her arm, trying to stabilize it. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage almost immediately. Tell me your name. Evangeline, she managed. Good, Evangeline. Beautiful name. Biblical. Do you know what it means? She shook her head, the movement sending fresh nausea through her. Bearer of good news, Nathaniel said. He tied off the makeshift splint with practiced efficiency. I suspect you're going to bring some very bad news to someone soon. But we'll get to that. First, you have to live. The carriage rattled through the October night. 2 miles east, Nathaniel had said. 2 miles felt like crossing an ocean. Who are you? Evangeline whispered. I'm a private investigator, Nathaniel said. He pulled out a flask, unscrewed it with his teeth, and held it to her lips. Drink, just a little. It'll help with the shock. Whiskey burned down her throat. She coughed, and the coughing sent fresh fire through her ribs. Why were you in the garden? Nathaniel's eyes met hers. They were gray, serious. I was hired 2 weeks ago to investigate Constance Ashford Moreau, anonymous client, paid in advance. Wanted to know if she was embezzling from the estate. I've been watching her. Tonight I was in the East Garden with a notebook documenting her movements during the party. I saw her go up to the tower. I saw you follow, and I saw her push you. Evangeline felt something crack inside her that had nothing to do with her ribs. She killed my mother, she heard herself say. I know, Nathaniel said quietly. I suspected. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your mother died 6 years ago. Pneumonia, the records say. But pneumonia that came on suddenly in a healthy woman that killed her in less than a week. I've been checking with pharmacists. Constance purchased arsenic 3 times in the months before your mother died. Small amounts. Untraceable individually. The carriage hit a rut. Evangeline's vision went white with pain. When it cleared, they were pulling up to a small house set back from the road. Lamplight glowed in the windows. A sign hung by the door, Doctor. Josiah Crane, physician. Nathaniel carried her inside, kicking the door open. An older man looked up from a book. He was perhaps 55, with gray hair and the kind of face that had seen everything at least twice. He took in Evangeline's condition in one glance and stood without a word. Examining room, he said. What happened? Fell from a tower, Nathaniel said, laying Evangeline on the table as gently as possible. 40 feet, hit an embankment first. Left arm looks broken. Ribs cracked. Head injury. Possible internal bleeding. Dr. Crane began cutting away Evangeline's sleeve with scissors. His movements were efficient, practiced. You said fell. Did you mean pushed? I saw it happen, Nathaniel confirmed. Who pushed her? Her stepmother. Dr. Crane's hands paused for just a moment. Then he continued his examination. I'm going to hurt you now, he told Evangeline gently. I need to check the brake. I'm sorry. His fingers probed her arm. The pain made the world vanish into white static. When she came back, Dr. Crane was speaking to Nathaniel in low tones. Radius and ulna both fractured. Clean breaks, fortunately. 2 ribs cracked, possibly 3. The head wound is superficial, but she definitely has a concussion. The shoulder laceration needs stitches. But she'll live. The embankment slope saved her life. If she had hit flat ground from that height, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Can you keep her here? Nathaniel asked. For how long? As long as it takes, Dr. Crane studied them both. You're not taking her to a hospital. You're not reporting this to the police. Why, Palmer? Because the woman who did this, Nathaniel said, is wealthy, respected, and has spent 6 years building a reputation as a devoted stepmother. If we go to the authorities now, she'll say Evangeline fell. Accident. Tragic. And every person at that party tonight will confirm that Constance was downstairs the entire time. She's already back in the ballroom by now, playing the perfect hostess. So what's your plan? I don't have one yet, Nathaniel admitted, but this woman has already killed once, possibly twice if we count tonight's attempt. She needs to be stopped, and the only way to do that is to build a case so airtight she can't talk her way out of it. Dr. Crane looked at Evangeline. What do you want, young lady? Evangeline's throat was raw. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but every word was clear. I want her to pay for what she did to my mother, and I want everyone who ever trusted her to know what she really is. Then you'll have to be patient, Dr. Crane said, and clever, and willing to let her think she's won. He turned to his medical cabinet, pulling out laudanum and bandages. This is going to be a long night. Let's start by making sure you survive it. The hours that followed were a blur of pain and medicinal haze. Dr. Crane set Evangeline's arm with the kind of competence that came from 30 years of practice. The bones had to be aligned perfectly, or the arm would heal crooked, useless. She screamed through a leather strap clenched between her teeth. He stitched her shoulder with small, neat sutures, 23 of them, each one a fresh point of fire. He wrapped her ribs in tight bandages that made breathing an exercise in willpower. Every inhale felt like knives. Through it all, Nathaniel stayed. He held her uninjured hand when the pain became too much. He answered Dr. Crane's questions about the fall with the precision of a man trained to observe and remember details. And he told them about the investigation. Constance married your father 6 years ago, Nathaniel said, sitting in a chair by Evangeline's bedside as dawn began to gray the windows. 6 months after your mother died, she came with impeccable references. Old money family from Charleston, though the money had run out 2 generations ago. Beautiful, charming, perfect manners. Your father was grieving. Lonely. She was patient and kind, and exactly what a man in his position needed. Or seemed to be, Evangeline whispered. Exactly. Within a year, she had reorganized the household, changed the staff, moved your mother's portrait from the main hall to a smaller study. Small changes, nothing anyone could object to, but each change erased a little more of Elizabeth Ashford's presence. I noticed, Evangeline said. I told myself it was just her way of making the house her own. You wanted to believe the best of her, Dr. Crane said from where he was washing instruments. That speaks well of you, not of her, Nathaniel continued. She brought her daughter Serafina into the household. 19 years old then, pretty, well-trained in all the social graces. Constance began positioning her at every important social event, making sure she was seen by the right people, particularly by Thaddeus Blackwood. At the mention of Thaddeus, Evangeline felt her chest tighten. Does he know what happened? By now he knows you've disappeared, Nathaniel said carefully. Constance will have discovered your absence. She'll be looking for your body. When she doesn't find it, she'll adapt. She'll say you fell into the canal, that the current took you. She'll organize searches that find nothing. And in 3 days, society will declare you lost, presumed dead. No, Evangeline tried to sit up. The pain drove her back down. No, I have to tell him. I have to tell my father. They need to know. They need to think you're dead, Nathaniel said, and his voice was firm. I know how this sounds, but Constance is not a simple criminal. She's intelligent, calculating. She's been planning this for years. If you surface now before we have proof, she'll destroy you. She has money, connections, lawyers. She'll say you had a mental breakdown, that the fall made you delusional. She'll have you committed to an asylum before you can testify against her. He's right, Doctor, Crane said quietly. I've seen it before. Wealthy families making inconvenient women disappear into sanatoriums. Once you're in, it's nearly impossible to get out. Evangeline stared at the ceiling. Tears ran hot tracks down her temples. So I'm dead. For how long? As long as it takes to gather evidence that will stand up in court, Nathaniel said. Constance has been careful, but careful people get careless when they think they've won. Give her time. Let her believe she's safe. She'll make mistakes. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing the embezzlement, testimony from the pharmacist about the arsenic, proof that your mother's death wasn't natural, and witness testimony from me about what I saw tonight. Nathaniel leaned forward. But most importantly, we need to find out who hired me. Someone suspected Constance 2 weeks ago. Someone with money and resources. Someone who wants her exposed. Who? Before Nathaniel could answer, there was a knock at the front door. All three of them froze. The knock came again, firm, authoritative. Dr. Crane moved to the window, peered through the curtain. His eyebrows rose. Well, this should be interesting. Who is it? Nathaniel asked, his hand moving to something inside his coat. A weapon, Evangeline realized. Thaddeus Blackwood, Dr. Crane said. Evangeline's heart stopped. How did he find us? Nathaniel hissed. I imagine, Doctor. Crane said calmly, because he's the one who hired you. The knock came a third time. Dr. Crane went to the door and opened it. Thaddeus Blackwood stood in the morning light. He was 30 years old, tall, with dark hair and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. He wore an evening coat slightly rumpled, as though he had been wearing it all night. There was something in his face that Evangeline had never seen before. A hardness, a fury barely contained. Where is she? He asked. Doctor. Crane stepped aside. Thaddeus walked into the examining room. His eyes found Evangeline on the table, saw the bandages, the splint, the stitches. Something in his expression cracked. He crossed to her in 3 strides, dropped to his knees beside the examination table, took her uninjured hand in both of his. Evangeline, he said, and his voice broke on her name. You hired him, she whispered. You knew. I suspected, Thaddeus said. I've suspected Constance for 6 years, since your mother died. The symptoms Elizabeth showed in her final days were consistent with arsenic poisoning. But I was a railroad investor from California. No connection to your family. No standing to investigate. No proof. So you waited. I waited, Thaddeus confirmed. I made myself useful to your father. I attended social functions. I let Constance see me as a potential match for Serafina, and I waited for her to make a mistake. His hands tightened on hers. When your father mentioned you had come of age, I asked to be introduced. I thought if I could meet you, befriend you, perhaps protect you. I didn't expect... He stopped, swallowed. I didn't expect to fall in love with you, he said quietly. Evangeline felt fresh tears. The engagement. That was real. Every word Thaddeus said. Every moment. But it also gave me a reason to be close to your family, to hire investigators, to watch Constance more carefully. He looked up at Nathaniel. You saw it happen. I saw her push Evangeline off the tower, Nathaniel confirmed. Deliberate, premeditated, murder. Thaddeus stood. The fury in his face was terrible and cold. Then we have her. Not yet, Nathaniel said. Not without more proof. My word alone isn't enough. I'm a hired investigator. The defense will say I'm biased. We need the financial records, the poison purchases, a pattern of behavior. How long will that take? Months, maybe years. Years. Evangeline pushed herself up despite the pain. I'm supposed to let my father grieve for me for years. Thaddeus turned back to her. His face was anguished. Your father is a good man. Too good. He sees the best in everyone. If you go to him now, Constance will convince him you're confused, traumatized. She'll separate you from him. She might even convince him to have you institutionalized for your own protection. He's my father. He'll believe me. Will he? Thaddeus asked gently. Over the woman who has shared his bed for 6 years. The woman who runs his household, manages his social calendar, sits beside him at church. Constance has been very careful to become indispensable to him. Dr. Crane spoke up. The young lady has cracked ribs and a concussion. She needs rest. This conversation can continue when she's stronger. But Evangeline wasn't finished. She looked at Thaddeus with all the strength she had left. If I do this, if I let everyone think I'm dead, if I hide while you gather evidence, how long? Thaddeus met her eyes. 3 years, maybe less if we're lucky. But I need time to infiltrate her circle completely, to gain her trust. She'll try to push me towards Serafina now that you're gone. I'll let her. I'll play the grieving suitor who slowly, reluctantly moves on. And while I'm doing that, Nathaniel will be building the case against her. 3 years, Evangeline repeated. The words felt like stones. 3 years where she thinks she's won, Thaddeus said. 3 years where she gets comfortable, careless, where she makes mistakes we can document. He knelt beside her again. I know what I'm asking, but I will not let her escape justice. Not for your mother, not for you, even if it takes the rest of my life. Evangeline looked between them. Nathaniel, the investigator, who had saved her life. Dr. Crane, the physician willing to harbor her. Thaddeus, the man she loved, proposing a plan that would require patience beyond measure. Outside, birds were beginning to sing. Morning had come to the Hudson Valley. In Thornwood Estate, Constance would be discovering that Evangeline's body was not in the courtyard, would be adapting her story, would be preparing to play the devastated stepmother, and 300 guests would accept whatever she told them. Because Constance was beautiful and charming, and no one could imagine a woman like that capable of murder. Evangeline thought of her mother, Elizabeth Ashford, who had died in agony, probably knowing she'd been poisoned, probably knowing by whom, unable to prove it, unable to stop it. She thought of her father who would grieve, who would suffer, but who would be alive. Constance had no reason to kill him yet, not while she could still control him. She thought of Serafina, who was perhaps not evil, merely shaped by an evil woman. A girl who had never been given a chance to be anything except what her mother made her. And she thought of justice, not revenge, justice. The kind that happens in daylight, in courtrooms, in front of witnesses who cannot look away. 3 years, she said finally. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them, Thaddeus said. I don't hide and heal and wait. I prepare, I learn. Nathaniel, you'll teach me how to investigate, how to gather evidence, how to document crimes. Dr. Crane, you'll give me books on psychology, on manipulation. I want to understand how women like Constance think. Done, Dr. Crane said. And you, she looked at Thaddeus, you'll teach me to be strong enough that when I walk back into that ballroom, I won't be the girl who fell from a tower. I'll be the woman who climbed back up. Something fierce and proud filled Thaddeus's face. I will. And then we have a plan, Evangeline said. She lay back against the pillow, exhausted but resolved. 3 years. Let her think she's buried me. Let her celebrate. Let her position Serafina. Let her believe she's untouchable. And then, Nathaniel asked. Evangeline's voice was quiet but absolute. And then we show her what it's like when the dead come back to testify. The room fell silent. Outside, the October sun climbed higher, illuminating a world that believed Evangeline Ashford was lost. Gone. A tragic accident at her own engagement party. But in Dr. Crane's examining room with her broken bones and burning resolve, Evangeline was more alive than she had ever been. Pain had a way of clarifying things, of burning away everything except what mattered. What mattered was justice. What mattered was truth. What mattered was making sure that when Constance Ashford Moreau finally stood before the world, there would be nowhere left to hide. Thaddeus stood. I should go. My absence will be noticed. I need to return to Thornwood, to search for you with the others, to play my part. How will we communicate? Evangeline asked. Through Nathaniel, Thaddeus said. He'll be my intermediary. Publicly, I'll hire him to investigate your disappearance, search for your body. It gives him cover to move between both worlds. He looked at the investigator. Continue documenting Constance, everything. Every purchase, every conversation, every social call. Build the timeline. Nathaniel nodded. And the financial records. I'll work on getting access to those. Richard trusts me. In his grief, he'll need someone to help manage estate business. I'll offer. Constance won't suspect because she wants me close to Serafina anyway. It's dangerous, Dr. Crane observed. If she realizes you're investigating her, she won't, Thaddeus said, because I'm going to give the performance of my life. The grieving suitor, the loyal friend to Richard. The man slowly, reluctantly allowing himself to be comforted by Serafina's company. He looked at Evangeline. It will be the hardest thing I've ever done. I know, Evangeline said softly. He crossed back to her one final time, bent down, pressed his forehead to hers with infinite gentleness. 3 years. Then I'm coming for her, for your mother, for you. We're coming for her, Evangeline corrected. This isn't your fight alone anymore. No, Thaddeus agreed. It's not. He left as the sun climbed higher. Evangeline watched through the window as he mounted his horse and rode back toward Thornwood Estate, back toward the ballroom where people were probably still searching, where Constance was orchestrating the search, where her father was experiencing the worst day of his life. She felt the weight of what she'd agreed to. 3 years of being dead. 3 years of watching from the shadows while Constance played the devoted stepmother and Richard grieved for a daughter who was alive. But she also felt something else, something she hadn't felt in 6 years of living under Constance's roof. She felt powerful, not despite the broken bones and pain, because of them, because she had survived what was meant to kill her, because she now knew exactly what Constance was capable of, because the woman who had pushed her off that tower had no idea that the most dangerous thing she'd ever done was leave Evangeline alive. Dr. Crane brought her water and more laudanum. You should rest now. Your body needs time to heal. How long before I can move without help? The ribs will hurt for weeks. The arm will take 2 months in the splint, then another month of careful use. The concussion symptoms should fade in a week or 2 if you're lucky. He studied her. But you're not asking when you'll be healed. You're asking when you'll be functional. Yes. Functional enough for what? Evangeline looked at him steadily. Functional enough to start learning everything I need to know to destroy her. Dr. Crane's weathered face creased in something that might have been a smile. Then I'd say 6 weeks. 6 weeks, and you'll be mobile enough to begin your education. He paused. But Evangeline, this path you're choosing, revenge disguised as justice, it will change you. I know. You'll become harder, colder. You'll have to become calculating in ways young women shouldn't need to be. My mother was poisoned, Evangeline said. I was pushed off a tower. I think I've already been introduced to ways young women shouldn't need to know. Dr. Crane nodded slowly. Fair point. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother, Elizabeth. I knew her slightly, treated her a few times for minor ailments. She was a good woman, kind of ion, strong in quiet ways. She was, Evangeline whispered. She would be proud of you, not for seeking revenge, but for seeking truth. There's a difference. Is there? There is, Dr. Crane said firmly. Revenge is personal, selfish. It destroys the person seeking it as much as the target. But truth is a gift to everyone. Truth protects others. Truth prevents the next victim. What you're doing isn't just for Elizabeth or for yourself. It's for every woman Constance might harm in the future if she's not stopped. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Evangeline lay in the morning light, feeling the laudanum begin to dull the sharp edges of pain. Her body was broken, but her mind had never been clearer. 3 years seemed like forever, but she had time, and she had allies now, and she had something Constance didn't have. She had survived the fall, and survival, Evangeline was beginning to understand, was its own kind of power. The power to wait, to plan, to become someone new while everyone believed the old version of you was dead. She closed her eyes and began counting. Not sheep, but steps. Step 1, heal. Step 2, learn. Step 3, gather evidence. Step 4, wait for the perfect moment. Step 5, walk back into that ballroom and watch Constance's face when she realized her greatest mistake hadn't been pushing Evangeline off the tower. It had been failing to make sure she stayed down. Outside, the October day continued. Birds sang, leaves fell. The Hudson River flowed indifferent and eternal. And in Thornwood Estate, a woman who believed she had committed the perfect murder began planning her next move. never suspecting that 40 feet below a tower balcony she had not buried a victim. She had created an enemy who had nothing left to lose, and 3 years to become unstoppable. The first day of the 3 years had begun. Evangeline Ashford, presumed dead, smiled into the pillow and let the laudanum take her into dreamless sleep. The fall was over. The reckoning had just begun. 6 months had passed since the fall. Spring had come to the Hudson Valley, turning the world green and gold, filling the air with the scent of apple blossoms and fresh earth. Life continued. The seasons turned. And somewhere in that relentless forward motion, society had accepted that Evangeline Ashford was dead. The memorial service had been held in November. 300 guests, just as there had been at the engagement party. Constance had worn black silk and wept beautifully. Richard Ashford had looked like a man whose spine had been removed hollow and bent, aged 10 years in a month. Thaddeus Blackwood had stood in the back of the church, his face a mask of controlled grief. He had not wept. Men of his station rarely did, at least not publicly, but those who knew him remarked that something in him had changed. A hardness had entered his eyes, a coldness. They assumed it was grief. They were wrong, it was fury, but fury properly controlled could be useful. Fury could be sharpened into a blade. And for 6 months, Thaddeus had been sharpening it while Evangeline healed in the small cottage behind Dr. Crane's house, learning to become someone new. The cottage had one room, a bed, a desk, a washstand, and bookshelves lining every wall. Dr. Crane had filled those shelves deliberately. Psychology texts, legal treatises, medical journals on poisons and their symptoms, accounting ledgers, and bookkeeping manuals. Evangeline had read them all. Her arm had healed slower than Dr. Crane predicted. The break had been worse than they first thought. But by February, the splint came off. By March, she could grip a pen without her hands shaking. By April, she could write for hours without pain. Her ribs had mended faster. The concussion headaches faded. The shoulder scar turned from angry red to pale pink, a thin line that would never fully disappear. She was glad. She wanted the scar, wanted the reminder of what Constance was capable of. This particular April morning, Evangeline sat at the desk by the window practicing signatures. Not her own. She had been dead for 6 months. She needed to learn to be other people now. Better, Nathaniel said from the doorway. He had taken to visiting 3 times a week, bringing newspapers from the city, updates on the investigation, and lessons in skills young ladies were never supposed to need. But the R is still too feminine. When you're forging a man's hand, you need to think about how differently they hold the pen. More pressure, less flourish. Evangeline adjusted her grip and tried again. Good. Nathaniel approved. He set down a leather case on the desk. Today we moved to locks. I brought 6 different types. By the end of the week, you should be able to open all of them in under 3 minutes. Why 3 minutes? Because that's how long you have before a servant making rounds will notice a door that should be locked is standing open. He pulled out the first lock, a simple pin and tumbler mechanism. This is the type used on most bedroom doors in estates like Thornwood. 5 pins, easy spring tension. Watch. He demonstrated with 2 thin metal picks, his fingers moving with practiced precision. The lock clicked open in 15 seconds. Your turn, he said, handing her the picks. Evangeline's first attempt took 4 minutes, her second 3.5. By her 10th attempt, she had it down to 2 minutes flat. You're a natural, Nathaniel observed. Steady hands, good spatial reasoning. You'd have made an excellent thief. I'm an excellent thief, Evangeline corrected. I'm just stealing justice instead of jewelry. Nathaniel's mouth quirked. Over the past 6 months, she had learned that was as close as he came to smiling. Fair distinction. He pulled out a newspaper from his case, the New York Herald, 3 days old but still relevant. You should see this. The headline, Blackwood and Ashford Families United in Grief and Business. Evangeline scanned the article. It detailed how Thaddeus Blackwood had stepped in to help Richard Ashford manage the estate's business affairs. How Richard, devastated by his daughter's death, had gratefully accepted the assistance. How the 2 men had formed a close friendship through shared sorrow. He's inside, Evangeline said softly, completely. Richard trusts him, has given him access to the estate's financial records, investment portfolios, everything. Which means Thaddeus can now document what Constance has been doing. And what has she been doing? Nathaniel pulled out a second newspaper. This one was a society column. Healing, or appearing to. She's been hosting small dinners, tasteful, appropriate for a household in mourning. And at each dinner, Serafina plays piano, performs perfectly. And Thaddeus is always invited. Evangeline studied the photograph accompanying the article. Serafina at the piano looking ethereal in pale lavender. Constance in the background, the picture of maternal pride. and Thaddeus seated in a chair nearby, his expression politely attentive. He's enduring it, Evangeline said. He's enduring it for you, Nathaniel corrected. Every dinner, every performance, every conversation where Constance subtly suggests how well-suited he and Serafina are. He sits through it all because it gets him closer to what we need. Have you spoken to him? Last week, he's found evidence of the embezzlement. Constance has been siphoning funds from the estate for 3 years. Small amounts at first, larger now. Always disguised as legitimate expenses. Medical bills for Elizabeth, household improvements, charitable donations that never reached their intended recipients. Evangeline felt something cold settle in her chest. How much? Conservatively, $40,000. The number was staggering, enough to live comfortably for a decade, enough to establish Serafina in society without needing to marry well. But Constance wants more, Evangeline said. She wants the Blackwood fortune. Exactly, which is why she's being so careful with Thaddeus. Patience, subtlety. She knows if she pushes too hard, he'll retreat. So she's letting him grieve, letting him come to Serafina in his own time, or appear to. Nathaniel laid out more documents, bank statements, receipts, a timeline he had been constructing, tracking every penny that had flowed out of the Ashford estate and into Constance's private accounts. The poison purchases are harder to prove, he admitted. The pharmacist who sold her the arsenic died 2 years ago. His son runs the shop now, but has no records from that far back. However, I found the doctor who attended your mother in her final illness. Dr. Werner. He's retired now, living in Connecticut. I showed him Elizabeth's symptoms as documented in Richard's diary. And he said that at the time he suspected arsenic poisoning, but Constance was so devoted, so distraught. Richard so clearly in love with his wife. Werner convinced himself he was seeing conspiracies where there were none. He signed the death certificate as pneumonia and has regretted it ever since. Will he testify? He will, with persuasion. He's old now, wants to clear his conscience before he meets his maker. Evangeline stood, walked to the window. Outside Dr. Crane's garden was in full bloom, roses and lavender, peaceful, beautiful, a world away from the darkness they were documenting. When do I go back? She asked. Not yet, Nathaniel said firmly. You're not ready. I can pick locks. I can forge signatures. I've read every book on manipulation and psychology in Dr. Crane's library. What more do I need? You need to be able to walk into a room full of people who think you're dead and not break down. You need to be able to look Constance in the face and not show fear. You need to be able to testify in a courtroom without your voice shaking. Nathaniel's expression softened slightly. You're strong, Evangeline. Stronger than most people I've met. But this isn't about strength. It's about control. And you're not there yet. Then teach me control. I am, every day, but some things only time can teach. Evangeline turned back to him. How long? Thaddeus estimates 2 more years, maybe less if Constance makes a major mistake. But she's careful, too careful to trip easily. 2 more years. The words settled heavy. What does he need me to do in the meantime? Nathaniel considered, then reached into his case and pulled out a final document, building plans for Thornwood Estate. Next month, Constance is hosting a charity gala. She's opening the estate to 300 guests. The household will be busy, distracted. It would be an ideal time for someone to enter unnoticed and access her private office. You want me to break into Thornwood. I want you to retrieve the original ledgers, the ones she keeps in her office safe. Thaddeus has found the duplicates, the ones she shows Richard. But the real accounting, the true records, those are locked in a safe behind a painting in her private study. Evangeline's heart began to beat faster, not with fear, with anticipation. I'll need the combination. Thaddeus got it. She keeps it written in her diary. He copied the numbers. Nathaniel handed her a slip of paper. 6 digits, left 3 times right, twice left once. And how do I get into the estate without being recognized? You'll go as part of the catering staff. I've already arranged it with the company Constance hired. They're always looking for extra servers for large events. You'll wear a uniform. Keep your head down. When the gala is in full swing and everyone is occupied, you slip upstairs. 10 minutes to open the safe, copy the ledgers, and return them. No one will ever know you were there. Unless I'm caught. Don't be caught, Nathaniel said simply. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Nathaniel brought a safe identical to the one in Constance's office. Evangeline practiced the combination until she could open it blindfolded. They timed her again and again until she could accomplish the task in under 8 minutes. Dr. Crane contributed his own lessons. How to move silently, how to control breathing during stress, how to project calm even when terrified. Techniques he had learned during his own youth, though he never explained where. And on the night of the gala in mid-May, when Thornwood Estate blazed with light and music and 300 guests in their finest, Evangeline dressed in a black server's uniform and entered the home where she had grown up. The kitchen was chaos. Servers rushing, cooks shouting orders, steam and heat, and the clatter of china. No one looked at her twice. She was just another hired girl, anonymous in black and white, carrying trays of champagne. She kept her head down as she moved through the service corridors, kept her breathing steady. Her hands did not shake. The main ballroom was brilliant with candlelight. She paused in the doorway, hidden behind a marble column, and looked. There was Constance, resplendent in emerald silk, moving through the crowd with grace and practiced warmth, playing the perfect hostess. The devoted stepmother who had suffered such tragedy but was bravely carrying on. There was Serafina at the piano, her fingers dancing over keys. Mozart tonight. Perfectly executed. She wore ice blue, her mother's choice certainly. Her face was composed, but her eyes looked tired. There was Richard, thinner than Evangeline remembered, older, standing with a group of businessmen, but not really present, going through the motions of life. His hand trembled slightly when he reached for his glass. The laudanum, Evangeline realized with a fresh surge of anger. Constance was controlling him even now. And there was Thaddeus. He stood near Serafina's piano, a glass of whiskey in hand, listening politely as Constance spoke to him. He was smiling. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Evangeline forced herself to look away, forced herself to remember why she was here. She slipped up the servants' staircase while the first course was being served. The upper floors were empty. Everyone was downstairs. Even the household staff were occupied with the gala. Constance's private study was at the end of the east corridor. The door was locked. Evangeline had it open in 90 seconds. Her hands moved with confidence now. Muscle memory from 2 weeks of practice. The room smelled of rosewater and old paper. Constance's desk stood by the window, neat and organized. The safe was exactly where Thaddeus had said it would be, behind a portrait of Constance's own mother, long deceased. Evangeline moved the painting aside carefully. The safe was steel imported from Germany, the best money could buy. The kind of safe that said, "I have secrets worth protecting." She pulled out the slip of paper with the combination. Left 3 times to 18, right twice to 44, left once to 7. Her hands were steady as she turned the dial. Click, click, click. The safe swung open. Inside were ledgers, 3 of them, leather-bound, filled with Constance's precise handwriting. Evangeline pulled them out, set them on the desk, and began photographing pages with the small camera Nathaniel had given her. A Kodak, new technology, portable enough to conceal in a pocket. She worked methodically, page after page, hundreds of entries, money flowing out of the Ashford estate, money flowing into accounts under false names, money spent on things Richard knew nothing about. And then she found it, a separate ledger, smaller, hidden behind the others. She opened it. The first page was dated 1883. 6 years ago, the year Elizabeth had died. The entries were medical expenses, except they weren't. Evangeline recognized the pattern now after months of studying accounting fraud. These were payments to a pharmacist, small amounts, regular intervals, disguised in the ledger as payments to Dr. Werner. But Dr. Werner had told Nathaniel he was never paid directly. Richard had paid him through the estate's general medical account. These payments were for something else. Arsenic, it had to be. Evangeline's hands shook as she photographed each page. Evidence. Proof. Constance had been planning Elizabeth's murder for months, buying poison, administering it slowly, making it look like a natural illness. And no one had suspected because Constance had been so devoted, so caring. Always at Elizabeth's bedside, bringing her tea, her medicine, bringing her death one small dose at a time. Evangeline's vision blurred. She blinked hard. No, not now. No time for emotion. Document everything. Leave no trace. Return the ledgers exactly as they were. She finished the photographs, returned the books to the safe in precise order, closed the steel door, spun the combination to lock it, returned the portrait to its place on the wall. The entire operation took 9 minutes. She slipped out of the study, locked the door behind her, and descended the servants' staircase just as the second course was being cleared. No one had noticed her absence. She served champagne for another hour, keeping her face bland and forgettable, then slipped out through the kitchen entrance when her shift ended. Nathaniel was waiting in a carriage 3 streets away. "Well?" he asked. Evangeline handed him the camera. Everything, financial records, embezzlement, and the arsenic purchases, documented and dated. starting 6 months before my mother died. Nathaniel's expression turned grim. Then we have her. Not yet, Evangeline said, echoing what he had told her so many times. We have evidence, but we need more. We need witnesses. We need testimony. We need everything so airtight that no lawyer in New York can create reasonable doubt. You're learning, Nathaniel said. I've had good teachers. The carriage rolled through the night, carrying them away from Thornwood, away from the woman who had murdered Evangeline's mother and tried to murder Evangeline herself, the woman who was at this very moment playing hostess to 300 guests, beautiful and gracious and beloved. Back at the cottage, Evangeline developed the photographs in the makeshift darkroom Dr. Crane had set up. Chemistry and patience. The images emerged slowly from the solution, page after page of evidence. She pinned them to the wall of her room, started building her own timeline matching Nathaniel's work. Every transaction, every date, every lie. The months blurred into each other after that night. Summer came, then autumn, then winter again. Year 2. Evangeline continued her education. Nathaniel brought more locks, more complex mechanisms. She mastered them all. Dr. Crane taught her about poisons, their symptoms, their detection. How to recognize the signs of arsenical poisoning, mercury poisoning, strychnine. She learned to disguise herself. Hair dyed darker, padded clothes to change her silhouette, spectacles, different walks, different postures, how to become invisible by becoming ordinary. And she waited. Thaddeus sent messages through Nathaniel, coded letters that looked like business correspondence, but contained information about Constance's movements, her social schedule, her conversations, the way she was slowly, incrementally pushing him towards Serafina. She grows bolder, one message read. Yesterday, she suggested that Serafina would make an excellent manager of a large household, that she has been trained in estate management since childhood, that she understands the responsibilities that come with great wealth. Another message 3 months later. Richard's health declines. Dr. Werner's replacement says it is merely age and grief, but I have seen grief. This is something else. I have secured samples of his food and drink. Can you have them tested? Evangeline brought the samples to Dr. Crane. He tested them with the kind of equipment that made her grateful he had once had a very different career than country physician. Small amounts of laudanum, he reported. Not enough to kill, but enough to keep a man foggy, compliant, unable to think clearly or question what is happening around him. She's drugging him, Evangeline said, carefully, maintaining him in a state where he's functional but not fully present. It's actually quite clever. No one would suspect. Laudanum is commonly prescribed for grief and melancholy, but the dosage matters. Can we prove it? Not without access to his medical records and the prescriptions, which Constance controls. Another dead end, another piece of the puzzle that was tantalizingly close but not quite provable in court. But they kept building the case, piece by piece, month by month. In the spring of year 2, Evangeline made her second infiltration of Thornwood, this time as a seamstress hired to do alterations on Serafina's wardrobe. She spent 3 days in the household unremarkable and ignored taking the opportunity to explore. She found Constance's bedroom. The private diary she kept hidden in a locked drawer of her dressing table. Evangeline picked the lock, photographed the relevant pages, and returned everything exactly as it had been. The diary was damning. Not confessions. Constance was too smart for that. But observations, complaints, small moments of truth when she thought no one was watching. Elizabeth's portrait still hangs in Richard's study. I have asked him twice to move it. He refuses. The ghost remains. Evangeline questioned me today about the household accounts. I told her it was not appropriate for unmarried young ladies to concern themselves with finances. She accepted this, distrusting, like her mother. And then the entry dated 1 week before Evangeline's engagement party. Blackwood has chosen the wrong daughter. I have worked too hard positioning Serafina for this match. 3 years of effort. I will not let Elizabeth's child take what belongs to mine. There are ways to correct mistakes. I corrected one 6 years ago. I can correct another. Evangeline's hands shook as she photographed that page. Proof of intent. Not quite a confession, but close. She left the diary of the house and returned to Dr. Crane's cottage with her evidence, added it to the growing wall of documentation. Nathaniel estimated they now had enough to convince a magistrate to investigate, but Thaddeus counseled patience. Not yet, his message read. She must be so secure in her victory that she never sees us coming. I am close. She has begun suggesting that an engagement between myself and Serafina would honor Evangeline's memory, that it would unite our families as was always meant to be. I have indicated that I am not opposed, that I am in fact considering it. Evangeline read that message alone in her room, knew intellectually that it was strategy, that Thaddeus was playing a part, that every word he spoke to Constance was calculated to draw her deeper into complacency. But knowing and feeling were different things. She trusted him. But trust did not eliminate the small voice that whispered, what if he forgets? What if the performance becomes reality? What if Serafina's innocent beauty and Constance's manipulation succeed where they failed before? She crushed the voice, locked it away. Trust or don't trust. There was no middle ground. She chose trust. Summer of year 2 brought the first real danger. Constance noticed a discrepancy in the ledgers. Small, nearly imperceptible. But she had built her fortune on attention to detail. Nathaniel's message arrived urgent and unsigned. She's hired an investigator, former Pinkerton. Name is Garrett. He's good, very good. He's been following me for 3 days. Assume we're compromised. Burn this message. Evangeline did not burn the message. She planned. If Garrett was following Nathaniel, he would eventually follow the trail to Dr. Crane's cottage. To Evangeline, and if he saw her alive, everything ended. Unless she saw him first. She spent a week preparing, studying Garrett's routines. He was professional, careful. But every professional has patterns. He favored a particular tavern for lunch. Always took the same route back to his office. Evangeline chose a day when Nathaniel had a meeting with Thaddeus. Garrett would follow. She would be ready. She dressed as a street vendor. Apples in a cart, hair hidden under a scarf, face dirty enough to be unmemorable. She positioned herself at the corner where Garrett would pass. When he walked by focused on Nathaniel 30 yards ahead, Evangeline stumbled. The apple cart tipped. Apples rolled everywhere directly into Garrett's path. He stopped, cursed. Bent to help collect the apples because despite being a Pinkerton investigator, he was fundamentally a gentleman. While he gathered fruit, Evangeline palmed a small envelope from her pocket and slipped it into his coat, so smoothly he never felt it. The envelope contained a photograph, not of Evangeline, of Garrett himself, taken 3 days ago outside his own office. The message was clear. I see you seeing me. And tucked inside the envelope, a single sentence in typed letters, ask Constance about Elizabeth Ashford's arsenic. Garrett would find the envelope that night, would realize he'd been made, would confront Constance with the question, and Constance, brilliant and careful as she was, would make a choice. Fire Garrett and stop the investigation, which meant giving up on finding who was looking into her affairs. Or keep Garrett and let him dig deeper, which risked him finding something she didn't want found. Either way, it bought them time. And it told Garrett professional that whoever was investigating Constance was better at this game than he was. 3 days later, Nathaniel reported that Garrett had closed the investigation, told Constance he found nothing suspicious, took his payment and disappeared. But Evangeline suspected something more had happened, that Garrett's skilled investigator that he was had found the arsenic comment too interesting to ignore, that he had started his own quiet investigation. She was right. 6 months later, in the deep winter of year 2, an unmarked envelope arrived at Dr. Crane's cottage. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I found the pharmacist's old records, buried in a warehouse scheduled for burning. Arsenic purchases 1882 to 1883, signed by C. Moreau. Also found 3 servants who worked at Thornwood during Elizabeth Ashford's illness, all willing to testify about Constance's exclusive control of the sick room. All documentation enclosed. Use it well. Some fights are worth fighting properly. GK. The envelope also contained copies of pharmacy receipts, witness statements, and a meticulous timeline that corroborated everything Nathaniel had documented independently. Garrett had not just closed the investigation, he had finished it, properly. Then handed them the weapons they needed. Evangeline added his evidence to the wall. The case was no longer just strong, it was overwhelming. The months continued their relentless march. Autumn became winter, became spring. Year 3 began. Evangeline was no longer the girl who had fallen from the tower. 2.5 years of study and practice and careful transformation had made her into something else. Someone harder, sharper, capable of things that would have horrified the 22-year-old who had stood on that balcony looking at stars. She could pick any lock in under 2 minutes, could forge signatures perfectly, could lie without her voice wavering, could disguise herself so thoroughly her own father wouldn't recognize her. She had become what she needed to be. And in April of year 3, the message finally came. Thaddeus sent it through the usual channels. But this one was different. Longer, more detailed. Constance has agreed to my proposal. I am to marry Serafina in June. Cathedral of St. John. 300 guests. The announcement will run in tomorrow's papers. This is our moment. Everything we've built leads to this. The wedding will be her triumph. The moment she believes she has finally won. It will also be her destruction. Are you ready? Evangeline read the message 3 times. Then she walked to her mirror and looked at herself. Really looked. The face that looked back was older than her 25 years, harder. The hazel eyes held things they hadn't held before. Knowledge of darkness, capacity for patience, understanding of exactly how far she was willing to go for justice. I'm ready, she told her reflection. She wrote her response that night. Short, direct. The trap is set. I'm coming home. Nathaniel delivered it the next morning. And somewhere in Thornwood Estate, Thaddeus Blackwood read those 5 words and knew that the 3-year performance was entering its final act. The morning papers confirmed it. Front page of the society section. Railroad magnate to wed Thaddeus Blackwood and Miss Serafina Moreau to unite 2 great families. The article was effusive in its praise, detailed how Thaddeus had been a pillar of support to the Ashford family after Evangeline's tragic death. How a deep friendship had grown between himself and young Serafina. How the union honored the memory of what might have been while creating something new and beautiful. It was the papers declared a love story born from shared grief. Only 4 people in the world knew the truth. Evangeline folded the newspaper carefully and added it to her collection. Evidence of the performance. Proof that Constance had achieved exactly what she set out to do 3 years ago. Almost. The wedding was set for the 2nd Saturday in June. 8 weeks away. 8 weeks to finalize the plan. To coordinate with Nathaniel and Thaddeus and Dr. Crane. To prepare herself mentally for what was coming. 8 weeks until she walked into that cathedral. 8 weeks until Constance Ashford Moreau discovered that the greatest mistake of her life hadn't been pushing Evangeline off that tower. It had been giving her 3 years to learn how to climb back up. Evangeline stood in the cottage that had been her home and her prison and her sanctuary, surrounded by evidence of Constance's crimes, and felt something settle into place. Not revenge, justice, cold, calculated, inevitable. The fall had ended 3 years ago. The reckoning was about to begin. The 2nd Saturday in June arrived with the kind of morning that makes people believe in providence. Clear sky, gentle breeze, sunlight that turned the Hudson River to liquid gold. Perfect weather for a wedding. The Cathedral of St. John stood at the heart of New York City Gothic spires, reaching toward heaven, its stone walls holding the weight of 1,000 ceremonies. Baptisms, funerals, weddings that joined families, fortunes, dynasties. Today it would witness something else entirely. By 9 in the morning, the cathedral was being prepared. White roses filled every alcove, their scent almost overwhelming. Candles in silver holders lined the aisle. The organ was being tuned, its deep notes reverberating through the vaulted ceiling. 300 chairs had been arranged. 300 guests were expected. The cream of New York society. The Astors, the Roosevelts, senators and railroad magnates and men whose names shaped the direction of American commerce. All of them coming to witness Thaddeus Blackwood marry Serafina Moreau. All of them about to witness something very different. In a hotel room 6 blocks from the cathedral, Evangeline stood before a mirror and prepared to return from the dead. She wore sapphire blue, deep and rich, the color of midnight oceans. Not white, not ivory. Those colors belonged to brides, to innocence, to beginnings. This was not a beginning. This was an ending. The gown was simple, no bustles or excessive lace, clean lines that allowed movement. Practical. She had learned in 3 years that practicality mattered more than beauty when you were preparing for war. Her auburn hair hung loose past her shoulders. No elaborate pinning, no jeweled combs, just the natural fall of it, the way it had been the night she fell from the tower. She wanted Constance to recognize her instantly. The scars were visible, the thin line across her left shoulder where Dr. Crane had stitched the laceration. She had chosen a gown with a neckline that revealed it deliberately. Evidence. Proof. This is what you did to me. Nathaniel knocked once and entered. He wore a dark suit, respectable but unremarkable. The clothes of a professional man attending a social event where he didn't quite belong. The cathedral is ready, he said. Thaddeus sent word. Constance arrived an hour ago. She's in the bride's preparation room with Serafina. Richard is in the front pew, looking worse than I've ever seen him. The laudanum. Almost certainly, but we'll deal with that after. First things first. Nathaniel handed her a leather portfolio. Everything. 3 years of evidence. Financial records. Poison purchases. Witness statements, Dr. Werner's testimony, Garrett's investigation notes. He sent them with a note that said he was glad someone was finally doing something about that woman. Evangeline opened the portfolio, page after page of documentation, proof. Incontrovertible and complete. Magistrate Hayes' position, she asked. Second pew left side, with two federal marshals in plain clothes. Thaddeus arranged it personally. The moment you give the signal, they move. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Nathaniel said with the certainty of a man who had planned for every contingency. You walk in, you speak, you present evidence. Constance is arrested. It's simple. Nothing involving Constance has ever been simple. True, but she's had 3 years to believe she's untouchable. 3 years of success. 3 years of playing the devoted stepmother and positioning Serafina. She's not expecting this. She can't be. Because you're dead. Evangeline looked at herself one final time. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the girl who had fallen from the tower. That girl had been soft, trusting, believed the world was fundamentally good. This woman knew better. Let's go, she said. The carriage ride to the cathedral took 12 minutes. Evangeline spent them in silence, watching the city pass. Streets she had walked as a child, buildings she recognized. A world that had continued without her for 3 years. Soon everyone would know why. They arrived at the cathedral's side entrance at 10:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The main doors were still open, guests still arriving, the social event of the season. Everyone wanted to witness Thaddeus Blackwood's wedding. They were about to get more than they bargained for. Nathaniel led her through a service corridor to a small chapel off the main sanctuary. From here, she could see into the cathedral without being seen, could watch the guests arriving, could observe. And there they were. Richard Ashford sat in the front pew right side. He looked 20 years older than when she had last seen him. His hair had gone completely gray. His shoulders slumped. His hands shook slightly where they rested on his knees. The tremor of long-term laudanum use. 3 years of grief. 3 years of being slowly poisoned with medication he didn't need. 3 years of believing his daughter was dead. Evangeline's chest tightened. Soon, Father. Soon you'll know the truth. Soon you'll be free. Behind Richard sat faces she recognized. Business partners. Social acquaintances. The Vanderbilts had come, she noted. Even old Mrs. Astor, who rarely attended anything anymore. All of them settling into their seats. All of them expecting a wedding. At precisely 11 o'clock, the organ began to play. Pachelbel's canon. Traditional. Expected. The rear doors of the cathedral remained closed. The bride had not yet entered. But from the front of the cathedral, Thaddeus Blackwood walked to the altar. Evangeline's breath caught. She had not seen him in 3 years. Had only received his messages, his coded letters, his careful reports. Had trusted that he was still the man she had loved. He looked exactly the same, and completely different. The same steel gray eyes, the same strong jaw, the same way of holding himself with absolute control. But something had changed. Something in the set of his shoulders. The hardness in his expression. 3 years of performance. 3 years of enduring Constance's manipulations in Serafina's company and the weight of a plan that required perfect execution. He stood at the altar and his eyes swept the cathedral, lingered for just a fraction of a second on the side chapel where Evangeline waited. He knew she was there. The organ shifted to a new piece. Wagner. Bridal chorus. The rear doors opened. Constance entered first. Mother of the bride. She wore burgundy velvet, her dark hair pinned in severe elegance, pearls at her throat. The picture of refined wealth, of respectability. She walked down the aisle with her head high, triumphant. This was her moment. 3 years of planning, 3 years of patience, and now victory. Behind her came Serafina. She wore cream silk, not pure white. That would have been inappropriate for a second wedding in a family, but close enough. The gown was beautiful, expensive, everything Constance's money could buy. But Serafina's face was not the face of a happy bride. She looked terrified. Evangeline saw it in the way her hands gripped the bouquet too tightly, the way her eyes darted to the exits, the paleness of her skin despite the rouge her mother had undoubtedly applied. This was not a woman walking toward love. This was a woman walking toward a destiny she had never chosen but had been unable to escape. For just a moment, Evangeline felt something unexpected. Pity. Serafina reached the altar. Constance took her seat in the front pew directly across from Richard. Her face was composed, satisfied. This was everything she had worked for. The priest began to speak. The traditional words, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Evangeline waited, watched. Let the ceremony proceed exactly as planned. The priest reached the critical question. If any person can show just cause why these two may not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The traditional moment, the moment that in hundreds of weddings passed in silence because no one ever actually objected. Not today. Evangeline stepped out of the side chapel. The sound of her footsteps on marble was very loud in the sudden quiet. 300 heads turned. She walked down the side aisle, not the center. Walked with her head high and her shoulders back and every ounce of strength she had cultivated over 3 years. She walked until she stood in the center of the cathedral between the pews where everyone could see her, where every eye in the room was fixed on her with the kind of shocked silence that comes from seeing the impossible made flesh. Constance's face went the color of old parchment. Richard made a sound, not a word, a sound like something breaking inside him. Serafina's bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the marble floor with a soft thud. Thaddeus remained absolutely still, but his eyes met Evangeline's, and in them she saw a relief so profound it was almost painful. The silence stretched, became something vast and terrible. Evangeline spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, carrying to every corner of the cathedral. My name is Evangeline Ashford. 3 years ago, on the night of my engagement to Thaddeus Blackwood, I was pushed from the North Tower of Thornwood Estate by Constance Ashford Moreau. I did not fall. I was pushed, with deliberate intent to murder. I survived, and I am here now to ensure that what she did is known to everyone. The silence shattered into chaos, voices erupting, people standing, confusion and shock rippling through the pews like a wave. Constance stood. Her face was composed with the kind of control that came from decades of practice. This is madness. This woman is clearly Olivamo, Evangeline interrupted, which you did not intend me to be. She opened the leather portfolio, held up the first document. These are financial records from the Ashford estate. They show systematic embezzlement over 6 years. $47,000 diverted into private accounts under false names, all controlled by Constance Moreau. Nathaniel stepped forward from the side chapel, began distributing copies to key witnesses, to Magistrate Hayes, to the federal marshals, to several attorneys in the crowd whom Thaddeus had positioned deliberately. Constance's lawyer stood. This is preposterous. These documents are clearly fabricated. They match the ledgers in Mrs. Moreau's private safe, Nathaniel said calmly, which I personally witnessed Mr. Blackwood access with proper legal authority as executor of estate business. Every transaction is documented, dated, cross-referenced with bank records. Additionally, we have independent verification from investigator Garrett Kincaid, formerly of the Pinkerton Agency, who conducted his own investigation and provided corroborating evidence. Evangeline held up a second document. This is testimony from Dr. Emil Werner. He attended my mother, Elizabeth Ashford, in her final illness 6 years ago. He suspected arsenic poisoning at the time, but was convinced otherwise by the devoted care shown by her new stepmother. She held up a third document. These are pharmacy records showing regular purchases of arsenic by Constance Moreau in the 6 months preceding my mother's death. Small amounts, purchased from 3 different pharmacies to avoid suspicion. But the pattern is clear. These records were preserved by investigator Kincaid and corroborated by 3 former Thornwood servants who witnessed Constance's exclusive control of my mother's sick room. A fourth document. This is a diary entry dated 1 week before my engagement party in Constance's own handwriting. Quote, Blackwood has chosen the wrong daughter. I corrected one mistake 6 years ago. I can correct another. End quote. The cathedral had gone silent again, but this was a different silence. The silence of people confronting something terrible, something that violated every assumption about the woman they thought they knew. Richard Ashford stood. His legs barely held him. He stared at Evangeline with an expression that cycled through disbelief, hope, grief, and dawning horror. Evangeline, his voice was barely audible. Is it truly you? She turned to her father. Let him see her face clearly. It's me, Father. I'm alive, and I'm so sorry you've suffered these 3 years. But it was the only way to gather enough evidence to stop her. Richard took a step toward her, stumbled. Thaddeus moved from the altar, caught him, helped him remain standing. She told me you drowned, Richard whispered. We searched for days. I thought, I know what you thought, Evangeline said gently. She meant for you to think it. She meant for everyone to think it. She turned back to Constance. You murdered my mother. You tried to murder me. You stole from my father. You drugged him to keep him compliant. You manipulated your own daughter into a marriage she clearly doesn't want. All for money, all for position. Constance's mask finally cracked. Just slightly, enough to show the calculation beneath. This is fabrication, she said. Her voice was cold now, hard. The devoted stepmother was gone. What remained was something else entirely. A vengeful girl with delusions seeking to destroy a woman who tried to guide her. Who tried to kill her, Thaddeus said. He had not moved from where he stood with Richard, but his voice cut through Constance's words like a blade. I hired Nathaniel Wren 3 years ago to investigate you, Thaddeus continued. He was in the East Garden the night of the engagement party. He witnessed you push Evangeline from the tower. He saved her life. And we have spent 3 years building a case against you that no amount of charm or money or social position can overcome. Magistrate Hayes stood. Mrs. Moreau, I am placing you under arrest pending formal charges of murder, attempted murder, embezzlement, and fraud. The two federal marshals moved down the aisle. Constance looked at them, at the 300 witnesses, at the evidence being passed from hand to hand, at her daughter who had collapsed into a pew and was crying silently, at Evangeline who stood in the center of it all, alive and whole and utterly unbreakable. For just a moment, something flickered across Constance's face. Not remorse, never remorse, but perhaps recognition, the understanding that she had made a fatal miscalculation. She had left Evangeline alive. This is not over, Constance said quietly. I have lawyers, resources. This is over, Magistrate Hayes said firmly. You will come with us now. You may remain silent or you may speak, but you will come. The marshals reached Constance. She drew herself up. One final performance. Dignity in defeat. They escorted her down the aisle, past the shocked faces of society, past the friends who had trusted her, past Richard who watched her with an expression of such profound betrayal, it was almost unbearable. She did not look at him, did not look back. The cathedral doors closed behind her with a sound like finality. The silence that followed was broken by a single sob. Serafina. She sat in the front pew still in her wedding gown, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook, not with grief for her mother, but with something that looked like relief. Evangeline crossed to her, sat down beside her. I didn't know, Serafina whispered without looking up. About your mother, about you. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, Evangeline said. She told me this was what I wanted, that Thaddeus was what I wanted. She's been telling me what I want since I was a child, and I believed her because I didn't know how to hear my own voice anymore. You're free now, Evangeline said quietly, to find out who you are, what you actually want. It won't be easy, but you can. Serafina finally looked up. Her face was blotchy with tears, her carefully applied makeup ruined, but her eyes were clearer than Evangeline had ever seen them. Thank you, she said, for stopping her, for saving me from this. She gestured at the altar, at the wedding that would never be completed. I would have gone through with it, because I didn't know how to say no, but I would have been miserable, and so would he. She looked at Thaddeus, who stood nearby with Richard. He loves you, Serafina said. He always has, even when he was sitting in our parlor listening to me play piano, even when my mother was whispering about how suitable we were. He was somewhere else entirely, with you. I'm sorry you were used, Evangeline said. I'm sorry I let myself be, Serafina replied. She stood. The wedding gown rustled, incongruous now, a costume for a play that had been canceled. I'm going to leave. Find somewhere my mother's voice can't follow. Somewhere I can think my own thoughts. Where will you go? I don't know yet, Serafina said, and she smiled, small but real. But that's the point, isn't it? I get to decide. She walked down the aisle and out of the cathedral. Several guests watched her go. Most were still in shock, still processing what they had just witnessed. Evangeline turned to her father. Richard stood with Thaddeus's support, tears running freely down his face. He looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. A miracle. Something his mind couldn't quite accept as real. Evangeline, he said, my daughter, my girl. She crossed to him. Let him touch her face with shaking hands. Let him confirm that she was solid, real, alive. I'm here, Father Bruce, she said. I'm sorry I let you grieve, but it was the only way. She killed Elizabeth, Richard said. It wasn't a question. The documents had made it clear, but he needed to say it, to hear it, to begin accepting the truth of what his wife had been. My Elizabeth, she poisoned her, and I never knew, I never suspected. You trusted her, Evangeline said. That's not a failing. That's who you are, kind, believing the best of people. She used that against you. That's her crime, not yours. I should have seen, Richard insisted. Should have protected you. Both of you. You couldn't have known, Thaddeus said quietly. She was very good at what she did. She fooled everyone, including me until I started investigating. And even then it took 3 years to build enough evidence. Richard looked at Thaddeus, at the man who had just been standing at the altar preparing to marry Constance's daughter, who had endured 3 years of performance to protect Evangeline. You knew, Richard said, this whole time. The engagement to Serafina, the friendship with me. All of it was strategy, Thaddeus confirmed. I'm sorry for the deception, but it was necessary. Constance had to believe she had won, had to feel secure enough to become careless. And the engagement to my daughter, Richard asked. 3 years ago, was that also strategy? Thaddeus's eyes met Evangeline's. That, he said, was the only real thing in any of this. Magistrate Hayes approached. Miss Ashford, we'll need your formal testimony, and we'll need to discuss the arrangements for the trial. Mrs. Moreau will undoubtedly attempt to mount a defense, though with this much evidence, I don't see how she can succeed. When do you need me? Evangeline asked. Monday will suffice. For now, I imagine you have other matters to attend to. Hayes glanced meaningfully at Richard and Thaddeus. Family matters. He left. The cathedral was beginning to empty. 300 guests filing out, whispering among themselves, spreading the story. By nightfall, all of New York would know. By morning, every newspaper in the country. The trial would be public. Spectacular. Constance Moreau's society darling, exposed as murderer and thief. Justice. Exactly as Evangeline had planned. But standing in the cathedral with her father and Thaddeus, Evangeline felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying a weight for 3 years and finally being allowed to set it down. Father, she said quietly, you need medical attention, the laudanum she's been giving you. It needs to be purged from your system under proper supervision. Richard nodded numbly. Dr. Werner, he's still practicing. I'll go to him. Not just for a visit, Evangeline said gently. You'll need to stay under his care. Laudanum withdrawal is serious. It will take weeks, possibly months, to clear your system completely. The shaking, the fog in your mind, the difficulty focusing, all of that is from 3 years of regular dosing. Dr. Werner will need to reduce the dose gradually or the withdrawal could be dangerous. Weeks, Richard looked frightened. I didn't know. I thought it was just grief. She said it would help with the grief. It was never about helping you, Thaddeus said quietly. It was about controlling you, keeping you compliant while she stole from the estate and positioned Serafina. But you'll recover. It will take time and it won't be comfortable, but you'll be yourself again. Will you stay with me? Richard asked Evangeline. During the recovery? Of course, she said, and after the trial, after all of this is finished. We'll rebuild the estate, the family, all of it. Richard's eyes welled with fresh tears. Your mother would be so proud of you, not just for bringing Constance to justice, but for the woman you've become. Strong, clear-eyed, brave beyond measure. I had to be, Evangeline said simply. For her, for you, for everyone Constance might have hurt if we hadn't stopped her. The trial came in September, exactly as Magistrate Hayes predicted. 3 months of preparation. 3 months of Constance sitting in a cell unable to manipulate or charm or control the narrative. 3 months of her lawyers attempting every defense they could conceive. None of it worked. The prosecution presented the financial records, the poison purchases, the diary entries, Dr. Werner's testimony about Elizabeth's symptoms, Nathaniel's eyewitness account of the push, Garrett Kincaid's independent investigation, the testimony of 3 former servants about Constance's control of Elizabeth's sick room. The defense tried to argue that Evangeline was unstable, that her reappearance after 3 years proved mental fragility, that her accusations were the product of a damaged mind seeking revenge for imagined slights. But Evangeline sat in the witness box for 4 hours and answered every question with such calm precision that even the defense attorney seemed shaken. She recounted the fall in clinical detail, described her injuries with medical accuracy, explained the 3-year investigation with the clarity of someone who had documented every single step. She did not cry, did not rage, simply told the truth. The jury heard the truth and believed it. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 43 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom was packed. Every newspaper in the country had sent reporters. The trial had been sensational. The society darling exposed as a killer. The daughter who rose from the dead to seek justice. Evangeline sat in the gallery and watched Constance's face as the verdict was read, watched for remorse, for fear, for any human reaction. Saw nothing. Constance's face remained composed to the end. Mask perfect, performance flawless. Even in defeat, she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The judge sentenced her immediately. Constance Ashford Moreau, you have been found guilty of murder, attempted murder, embezzlement, and fraud. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The cruelty of your crimes is exceptional. You poisoned a woman who trusted you. You attempted to murder her daughter. You stole from a man who offered you his home and his name, and you showed no remorse throughout this trial. I hereby sentence you to 15 years of hard labor at the New York State Women's Prison. You will serve every day of this sentence. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none. 15 years, the marshals led Constance away. She did not look back, did not acknowledge Richard, who sat pale and silent in the front row, 3 weeks into his laudanum withdrawal, and looking more present than he had in years. Did not look at Evangeline. She simply walked out of the courtroom and into 15 years of consequences. The newspapers called it the trial of the decade. Society was scandalized, horrified, delighted by the drama of it all. Evangeline didn't care what they called it. She cared that her mother's death was recognized as murder, that Constance would never hurt anyone again, that justice, however imperfect, had been served. Richard's recovery was slow and difficult, exactly as the doctors had warned. The first week was the worst. Sweats, tremors, nausea, confusion. He barely slept. When he did, nightmares woke him, but Evangeline stayed. Doctor Werner stayed, and slowly, gradually, the fog began to lift. By the third week, Richard could read without the words swimming on the page. By the sixth week, his hands had stopped shaking. By the eighth week, he smiled at something Evangeline said, and the smile reached his eyes. I feel like I've been asleep for 3 years, he told her one morning. Like I'm finally waking up. Everything is so clear now. Too clear. I see all the things I missed, all the signs I should have noticed. You weren't asleep, Evangeline said. You were poisoned. There's a difference. I chose to marry her. I brought her into our home, into your life. You chose to love again after Mother died. That wasn't wrong. What Constance did with that trust was wrong. You can't blame yourself for her crimes. Richard nodded slowly. Dr. Werner says I should be fully recovered by the end of October. Physically, at least. The emotional recovery will take longer. We have time, Evangeline said. All the time we need. 1 week after the sentencing, on a Saturday morning when autumn leaves turned the Hudson Valley gold and crimson, Evangeline married Thaddeus Blackwood. Dr. Crane's chapel held exactly 12 people. Richard, his color finally returning, his hands steady. Nathaniel dressed in his best suit. Dr. Crane himself looking pleased in the way of a man who had helped bring something good into the world. Serafina, who had written from Vermont, where she was teaching music to young girls and finding her own voice at last, asking permission to attend. 3 household servants from Thornwood who had known Elizabeth. Magistrate Hayes. And 2 witnesses whose names Evangeline didn't know, but who Dr. Crane said were trustworthy. No society reporters, no 300 guests, no spectacle, just truth. Simple and profound. Evangeline wore deep blue again, the color of midnight oceans, the color of strength. The shoulder scar was visible, deliberate, a reminder of what she had survived. Thaddeus wore simple black, no pretense, no performance. The ceremony took 11 minutes. The priest spoke the old words. The promises were made. Rings were exchanged. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Thaddeus cupped Evangeline's face in his hands and looked at her with such profound relief that she felt tears threaten. 3 years, he whispered, worth every day. Every day, she agreed. They walked out of the chapel together, into autumn sunlight, into a future that was finally truly theirs. Richard stood on the chapel steps, tears on his face but smiling, clear-eyed for the first time in 3 years. Your mother would be so proud of both of you, of what you've built from the ashes. We built it for her, Evangeline said, for the woman who deserved better than poison and lies. She got it, Richard said. In the end, justice, truth, and a daughter strong enough to fight for both. They had a small breakfast, simple food, easy conversation. The kind of gathering where no one had to perform, where everyone could simply be. Serafina played piano afterward. Not Mozart, not Strauss, something she had composed herself. Hesitant, imperfect, but hers. I'm still learning who I am, she told Evangeline. But I'm learning. That's what matters. It is, Evangeline agreed. As the sun climbed higher, the gathering dispersed. Lives to return to, futures to build. Evangeline and Thaddeus walked together through Dr. Crane's garden. The lavender was past blooming, but the roses still held color. The air smelled of earth and approaching winter. What now? Thaddeus asked. We have a whole life ahead of us. What do you want to do with it? Evangeline considered. Thought about 3 years of hiding, of learning, of becoming someone new. I want to help, she said finally. Other women, other families. People who are trapped like Serafina was. Like my father was. People who need someone to investigate, to document, to build cases against people like Constance. You want to be an investigator, Thaddeus said. I want to use what I learned. The skills Nathaniel taught me. The understanding Dr. Crane gave me. I want it to mean something beyond just stopping Constance. Then we'll do it, Thaddeus said. Together. I have resources, connections, money. You have skills and determination. We'll build something, an agency, private investigations, helping people who can't help themselves. Is that what you want? What I want, Thaddeus said, is whatever future lets me spend every day watching you be exactly who you are. Strong, fierce, brilliant. If that future involves investigating criminals and exposing murderers, then that's what we'll do. They reached the edge of the garden. A low stone wall overlooked the valley, the Hudson River in the distance, the world spreading out before them. Evangeline thought of the North Tower at Thornwood, thought of standing on that balcony 3 years ago, looking at stars, believing the world was fundamentally good. She had been wrong. The world was not fundamentally good. But it could be made better, one case at a time, one truth at a time, one person helped at a time. Constance took 3 years from us, Evangeline said. 3 years of our lives we can never get back. She did, Thaddeus agreed. But we took something from her too. Her freedom, her reputation, her ability to ever hurt anyone again. Evangeline turned to face him. And we built something she never had. Something real. Something that wasn't based on lies and manipulation. We built trust, Thaddeus said. The kind that comes from actually knowing each other, from choosing each other every day for 3 years, even when we couldn't be together. Exactly. They stood together as the afternoon lengthened into evening, as shadows grew long and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Evangeline looked up at those stars, the same stars she had looked at from the tower balcony 3 years ago. But she was not the same woman who had looked at them then, and she was stronger, harder, more aware of the darkness that existed in the world. But she was also more aware of the light, of the people like Nathaniel and Dr. Crane who helped because helping was right. Of the Thaddeus who waited 3 years because love meant patience. Of the Garrett Kincaid who could have walked away but instead finished the investigation properly. Of the truth that eventually inevitably finds its way to the surface. We should go, Thaddeus said eventually. We have a train to catch. Where are we going? Wherever you want. I booked tickets to Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, Charleston, New Orleans. Take your pick. We have time. For the first time in 3 years, we have all the time in the world. Evangeline smiled. Then let's start with Thornwood. I want to see the tower. Not afraid, not falling, just standing at the top, looking down, remembering that I survived. Are you sure? I'm sure. They traveled to Thornwood Estate that evening, arrived as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The tower stood at the northern corner, exactly as it always had. Old stone, iron balcony, 40 feet to the ground below. Evangeline climbed the stairs. Thaddeus followed, but gave her space. Let her take this moment alone. She stepped onto the balcony. The same balcony where Constance had stood, where hands had pushed, where everything had changed. The iron railing was cold under her hands, solid, real. She looked down at the courtyard below, the sloped embankment that had saved her life, the east garden where Nathaniel had found her. Looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the twilight sky, and she felt it, the full weight of what she had survived, what she had become, what she had accomplished. She had fallen from this tower, and she had climbed back up. Not for revenge, for justice, for her mother, for Serafina, for her father, for everyone who might have been Constance's next victim. The fall had broken bones, but it had not broken her. 3 years had transformed her, but they had not destroyed her. She was still here, still standing, still fighting, and she would continue fighting for as long as there were women like Constance in the world, for as long as there were families who needed protection, for as long as truth needed defending. Thaddeus joined her on the balcony, stood beside her, close enough to touch but not touching, letting her have this moment. Are you ready to come down? He asked eventually. Evangeline looked at the stars one final time. No, she said. I'm ready to move forward. They descended the tower together, walked through the estate gardens hand in hand, past the roses, past the place where she had learned to be strong, past all of it. Behind them, the North Tower stood silent in the gathering darkness, a monument to what had happened, a reminder of what had been survived. Ahead of them, the future waited, unknown, uncertain, but theirs to build, together. The reckoning was over. The rest of their lives had just begun.